Welcome back to the show, Digital Business Evolution. I know I always say it, but I'm so excited because we have one of my favorite people today. We have Miss Carrie Cohen. Carrie is a New York University trained licensed psychotherapist. She's had her own private practice for over 20 years. Carrie is also a holistic health coach, certified nutrition coach, and gut health specialist. She brings her holistic perspective to her work with all of her clients. As if that isn't enough, Carrie's also trained and certified in clinical hypnotherapy and rapid transformational therapy. She specializes in working with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs who are scaling their businesses to navigate the growing pains that business building brings and to avoid burnout. She's the creator of the Neuro Leadership Approach, a psychology based method to entrepreneurship and leadership. Y'all, if you've seen Billions, Carrie is the Wendy to your Axe. Carrie Cohen, I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
This is so fun. So, what the audience might not know is that you and I have been working together for over a year. And so, this just feels like a conversation with a friend,
Yeah, for sure.
except we're going to go deep. We're going to go real deep. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, let's start with a couple rapid fire questions. So, where do you currently live?
I live in Tampa, Florida.
Is that where you're from?
I'm originally from New York,
Where in New York?
Long Island.
Ah, I love it. What's your favorite movie?
Oh man, favorite movie is a feel-good movie, and it's You've Got Mail.
Oh, such a good one. I can hear that little like ding, the AOL
Uh-huh.
mail.
Uh-huh.
That's so cute. What are you currently reading?
Currently reading, I am rereading The Success Principles by Jack Canfield.
So good. I love Jack. He's so good with anything leadership. What
Mhm.
did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I wanted to be a teacher.
Oh,
Yeah.
you are a teacher.
Yeah, I guess I am. I thought I was going to be a teacher working with kids. And so I started my career working with kids, but I left working with kids probably about 10 years in.
Yeah. Okay. And then how'd you get to where you are today with psychology or psychotherapy?
Um,
Sorry.
I had a few professors in college who were really inspirational, and I knew that I wanted to do something in the field of psychology. I'm intrigued by what's going on in people's minds and why they do what they do. And I'm just fascinated by listening to their stories. So I get to do that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, one of my favorite things about you, and I have to just edify you on the podcast publicly to totally embarrass you, is how much I adore you, of course, and the work that you do. But something that I love about what you do that is very different than a lot of, I'm using quotes, mindset coaches, is that you're not just a mindset coach. You have over 20 years of experience as a psychotherapist, and you really do bring a lot of science back evidence and research tools and practices to the work that you're doing. So how important do you feel like it is seeing the coaching industry sort of explode with a coach left and right, everything, everyone's popping up to be a coach. How important do you think your unique skill set is when you're helping someone reprogram their subconscious mind?
So it is as a trained clinician, it's really ingrained in us around this idea that we need to do our own work so that we're keeping the pipes clean, so that we're not spilling our stuff over into our clients, and B, that we're not practicing beyond the scope of our practice. And that doesn't just mean that there's a list of things we shouldn't be practicing, but it also means that there are things that even I might encounter that I don't have experience with, that I really have no business doing. And so, those are some ethical things that I follow as part of my profession that, in the coaching industry, there really are no regulations. And I think when people don't know what they don't know, it's really easy to sort of fall into thinking that we can help everyone because we all go into this because we like to help people.
Yeah.
So I think that to me, that's one of the challenges. And so I like to really speak about this and try to get people to think these things through and educate themselves and educate their clients and such.
Yeah. And I love that you do that. And I love that you offer education on your platforms, on social media for other coaches, even people who might not be working with you at the moment or in this moment. It's so powerful to see the way that you talk about things like being trauma informed and what does it mean to do subconscious reprogramming and, what are some of the dangers of leaving somebody unraveled, for lack of a better term, right? You just said something though that I'd love to talk about. You said keep the pipes clean. And I love that because as a coach, which many of the listeners are, we do hear a lot of things from our clients and we hold a lot of energy and we hold we hold trauma and upset. And I know for me as a business coach, when our clients are having silent launches or they're getting no's and they're getting rejected and they're having limiting beliefs and self-doubt and all these things that they're bringing up on calls, it's really easy to, number one, feel that I'm responsible for their success. And number two, how do I not take their feelings and baggage and weight on? So do you have any tips or pointers for anyone listening to sort of keep the pipes clean?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I think having your own coach or mentor. So from early on in my career, I always had an outside, we called them supervisors, but an outside consultant, somebody who I could go to who A, could guide me in my clinical work, but B, really help me hold what I was holding with my clients, that I wasn't holding it alone. So first things first, is really good if you're doing this work. If I feel like if you're in service-based work, it's really important to have somebody who can hold that with you. So that's tip number one.
But are you
Number
just passing
two,
it off to that person then? Like, am I coming to my supervisor or mentor and just saying, hey, here's a bunch of stuff?
no, I think that you can download with that person. You can process it. That person certainly should be pretty familiar and experienced in the area that you're working in, so that they can really help guide you. So for example, if somebody's working with, I mean, trauma is kind of a big thing, but if somebody's working with trauma, it's really important to have a coach of sorts who is very familiar with and knows how to work with trauma and knows how to hold it.
Yeah.
And not just because they've had their own experience. I think that, when we have our own experience, actually we're too close. And so it's oftentimes not the best strategy to be working with someone who is going through the same thing we're going through, because we are too close. So
Yeah.
no, I think having a coach who can guide you, who can also help create space, and who can, when I say energetically, I mean psychologically. I mean, like, they have the psychological bandwidth to hold what you're holding psychologically, because we absorb what our clients are going through, no matter what.
Is that psychological bandwidth emotional intelligence, or is that something slightly different?
No, I would say psychological bandwidth is like the emotional and psychological dynamics that are going on, like the sort of the no, I think it's probably different than emotional intelligence, actually.
Yeah. Is emotional intelligence more just like neutrality?
Um, being emotionally intelligent, knowing yourself, knowing what's going on, being
Mm,
astute to be able to read people, read yourself. I sort of think of it in that way. It's not my area of expertise, but I would say I think of it in that way. But being able to, I would say neutrality comes from us doing our own work, really,
yeah.
right? Because if we don't do our own work, then we're going to be activated and triggered, and then we can't be neutral.
Yeah. This is one of those things where everyone says, do the work. And then,
Yeah,
you
what's
know,
the work?
what's the work, right? And that's exactly what Dr. Nicole LaPerla, is that the holistic psychologist? She
Yeah.
wrote the book, like How to Do the Work, because everyone's like, do the work. So what is the work? How do we do the work? I know with your work, you take a really cool approach that you created called the neuro leadership approach. So I'd love if we can break that down, because I know there are a couple elements there to doing the work in that way.
Yes. So neuroleadership approach is my three-part framework, which encompasses subconscious reprogramming, mind-body regulation, and the success leadership mindset. So when we talk about subconscious reprogramming, what I'm talking about is a couple of different things. And one is going to be where we actually get into our limiting beliefs and mental blocks. And, we don't always know what they are, because again, we don't know what we don't know. And the majority of these things reside in our subconscious and our unconscious mind, which is behind the subconscious. And so we don't really know them. So we usually stumble upon them when we start to get triggered or activated. And then it's good to, begin to keep track of those things so that we can go to someone and work with someone on that. DIY approach to subconscious reprogramming is not really a thing. And so subconscious reprogramming is where we go in. We identify some targeted limiting beliefs or mental blocks. We we go to the source of them. And the source is usually in some old experiences, childhood, adolescence, meaningful experiences, many of which have been tucked away. And when we start digging in there, people are like, wow, I haven't thought about that in a long time. I had no idea it was even relevant. which goes back to my point that, we don't really know what we don't know until someone can really help us start to dig in there and really do this excavation.
Yeah.
Um, so we get in there, we start, we get to the source, we connect the dots between those. So what we do is we go back to old experiences. I sort of do a regression. That's a scary word, I know, but we take people back to old experiences. They're not reliving them, they're just reviewing them. We connect those dots and then we link them to the present day, like presentation, how they feel and how they are in the present. And then we remove the old narrative. So all of these stories, all these limiting beliefs and mental blocks have stories attached to them. So we want to remove that story and we want to change the narrative. So then we replace it with something in the present that we want, a new story. And then we install it through repetition. And so we could think about it as remove, replace, and then repetition is really how I like to think about subconscious reprogramming of the mind. Now, repatterning nervous system is a little bit different, but that is the subconscious reprogramming. And I do that using rapid transformational therapy, hypnotherapy. I do what people know as shadow work. Inner child work is another word people know. I call it something different, more clinical, but
Sure.
doesn't really matter for the purposes of this. Is those are the things that people resonate with. And so we really are helping to connect kind of what's going on in the present with what's being activated from the past, so that we are operating from a here and now place rather than a then and there place.
Yeah. Well, you make it sound a lot less scary than it is, but I do have a question when you talk about going back. How far back do you go? Are you doing work in past lives?
No,
Okay.
I do not do past life regression.
Okay.
I am intrigued by that, but it is not an area that I do. So people go back. I've actually had people go back to the womb. Now,
Wow.
that's never personally happened to me in my work, but people have gone back to the womb. And so regardless if that's a real memory or something they were told, it doesn't really matter to me because I have full trust in the subconscious mind going where it needs to go. And I just work with where it's gone with
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of doing some hypnotherapy with you, which is really incredible. And I feel that people sometimes are hesitant to do anything like hypnotherapy because it sounds like hypnosis. And a lot of times we correlate that to all of a sudden I'm taking off my clothing and clucking like a chicken on stage. So what is the reason for the hypno part and how deep into hypnosis are we? And are you like implanting, right, Carrie, a check for $1 million into my brain? I know you're
Yeah.
not,
So,
but
that's funny. Yeah. So the hypno part that I place people into is really a deep state of meditation. So people are awake and they're awake in that
are we?
we
Are we ever really awake?
well, yeah, I mean that's left to question, right? So so in the hypnotherapy though, we're doing a sort of a deep meditative state, right? And so it's a sleep of the nervous system, which allows us to really relax. That's what we're doing when we're also in meditation. But the subconscious mind is active. So what we're doing is we're invoking a rapid eye movement state, REM sleep, which is when we are dreaming. And so when we are dreaming, our subconscious mind is active. So people are listening with their subconscious and they are suggestible only to the things that they want to be suggestible to.
Mm.
Now, there are ways that people can actually get in their own way when they are doing a hypnotherapy experience because they are resistant to being suggestible. And it just speaks to how rigid and potent some of these mental blocks and old limiting beliefs are, that they can be really hard to let go. So
Is that coming from a place of like protection? Like they're trying to protect their own
safety,
belief or safety? Yeah.
self-protection, defensiveness, not conscious defenses come from the subconscious, which is why the hypnotherapy is not necessarily always a one and done, because it
Got it.
depends how rigidified something is in there, that we might go in and have access to something and make a shift. And then I wait 3 weeks and see what residual is left over. And then we go in again, and then they come up with something different, because these things get, think about how long it takes these things to get into our psyche and crystallize themselves, that we can't just remove them typically with like one strategy, right?
Yeah.
It's a process really. So I'm never a one and done kind of person anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is still all chatting about subconscious reprogramming. And you take a really cool approach to subconscious reprogramming, which is this sort of top down, bottom up approach. So we're going to stay on subconscious reprogramming for a moment because I want you to expand a little bit more. What does it mean to go top down, bottom up?
Okay, so here's where we start to segue though. Here's where subconscious reprogramming and mind body regulation start to blend now. Okay,
Okay.
so
And that's step
so the-
2 of neuro leadership
yeah.
approach. Okay.
So the bridge there though between those two is repatterning our nervous system. So a top-down approach is when we use our mind, our cognitive thoughts to impact our body. A bottom-up approach is when we use our body and calm and ground our body to relax our mind. So it's sort of you've used this example before. Telling someone who's having a panic attack to calm down
Yes.
is a top-down approach. It does not work, right? Because the panic attack is in their body.
Right.
So when we're having a physical stress reaction, so stress starts in the body, anxiety really is thoughts, it starts in the mind. We can think about it that way. So stress starts in the body. So if we're working on a stressful response, then we need a bottom up approach. And there's all sorts of things people do. People do somatic experiencing, they do breath work, they do all sorts of things. So my approach to that, which is really where my experience is in nervous system regulation using polyvagal work, which has really moved into the clinical arena, probably in the last 10 years, I would say. It was kind of this separate just island onto itself. And now a lot of clinicians are using it. So the bridge for me though, with the reprogramming to the mind body regulation is that when we're doing nervous system regulation using a polyvagal approach, we can actually repattern our nervous system, which to me is so cool.
Yeah.
In the way that we can repattern our the way our mind is thinking. So we think neuroplasticity for our mind, we think bioplasticity for our body. And so the things that used to stress us out and make us lose it, when we do the work and repattern our nervous system, our threshold for those things has gone way up, and our tolerance for it has gone way up. So there's a lot more that we can actually manage and cope with and deal with because we've repatterned. We've sort of we have created new structures in there where we are no longer, and I'm saying that symbolically, we're not really creating new structures, but where we are no longer reacting to something old. So the nervous system basically houses a blueprint of all of our past experiences, just like our subconscious. So does the nervous system. It just houses them in a felt sense.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought up before the repetition. So it was like the ripping up, the taking out and then the rewriting and then the repetition. And years ago, gosh, it was probably 10 years ago when I was first doing my little online business thing. I remember doing a live on Facebook and I was telling people my understanding of rewiring the brain. And I used this analogy, which maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been telling people for 10 years, but it was like cornfields and the brain takes the path of least resistance. So the cornfield, right? The area that we've driven over with a car to get to the house on the other side over and over and over, it's beaten down. And so it's a clear path to the house. And when we rewire or we rewrite, and what you're saying is going in and creating a new pathway, is it takes repetition to create, like literally take a machete and start knocking down some new corn, and we're making a new path. And eventually the old one will get grown over, right?
Yep, that's a beautiful analogy. So between path of least resistance and also familiarity. So our mind resorts to what is familiar. So if there's already a pathway that's been carved out for us, we're going to by default take that same pathway until we create a new one and start walking down that one enough so that we have etched out it's a new little pathway, which essentially is a really great way also to just explain how we create new neural pathways in our brain.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. So now we have top down, bottom up, we're connecting the mind to the body to the mind, and getting that regulation. And then at that point, we bring in the third element to neuro leadership.
Yeah. So let me just say one other thing about mind body regulation. So we're repatterning the nervous system, which is the reprogramming. And then what we are also doing is, with a nervous system regulation practice, it's not just about practicing it when you're stressed. Like it's not
Mm.
about putting out fires. It's about integrating a practice daily so that it just becomes part of who you are and how you go through your day, whether it be your own breathwork practice or going out and getting vitamin D, or you listen to certain music or certain scents. And pretty much most of the nervous system regulating resources are things that we all know about. It's really a matter of A, using them intentionally, and B, because regulating resources are state specific, so they depend on what state we're in, using them intentionally and also using them in the right state. And so there's a little bit more to that, but they are all things that we all just do already. So
So
it's pretty straightforward in that regard.
yeah, for the listener who's half in, half out because you're driving or doing laundry, when you say state, you don't mean geographic location, right?
State specific. So really quick states. There's three main states and there's three blended, but we'll just talk about the three main because they're pretty much everybody can relate to those. So think about a ladder. The top of the ladder is the ventral vagal state, which is the safety, and that's the one we want to invite in the most. The most. It's where we feel grounded and we're connected, and our thinking brain is online, so we can actually think through something. Go down the ladder a couple of notches. In the middle is sympathetic, which is the fight flight, which is like in its mildest form is like worry or ruminating thoughts. It's also mobilizing energy. We do sympathetic prep if we're going to get ready to do like a really heavy lift and an exercise. And at its extreme, it's like anger and rage. And in that state chronically, that's what leads us to burnout. So when we think about burnout, that's extended sympathetic state.
Mm.
And then at the bottom of the ladder is the state called dorsal vagal, which is shutdown, collapse. So when we are in sympathetic and dorsal vagal, our thinking brain is offline, which is also why you can't tell someone who's having a panic attack to calm down, because their thinking brain is offline. It goes offline. And so we're in a body state. So
Gotcha.
yes, our regulating resources are very specifically tailored to move us, if we're in dorsal, to move us from the dorsal, move us up the ladder to sympathetic, and then another set to move us back into ventral vagal, which is where we want to try to spend more time than not, but the goal is not to always be there because that's not realistic.
Yeah. So before we move on, actually, do you have like a tangible thing that someone can do? Is it different for everybody? Do you have a tool for someone if we are in sort of level 2 of sympathetic or level 3 of dorsal and we want to go up the ladder? Like, is there something to get us up the ladder back towards number 1, which was ventral?
Yes.
Okay.
So it is unique for everyone, which is why we have to try these on. But I'll give you an example that probably could relate to people. So if we're in dorsal, we can't just do a breathing practice to get out of dorsal and get to ventral. We can't skip sympathetic. If we're in dorsal, we have to utilize a regulating resource to get us into sympathetic. And sympathetic is a mobilization state. So we need to do something to mobilize ourselves. And so from dorsal to sympathetic, it might be an easy walk. Like the dorsal person is like, just imagine fetal position in
Yeah.
bed in the dark. So the regulating resource is maybe to just get up and go for a walk, 10-minute walk. So that will just bring about some mobilizing energy. And then you move up into sympathetic, right? And so the reason why someone might go down to dorsal is because sympathetic was too overwhelming. And the body's way of protecting them from becoming completely overwhelmed is to actually shut down. So these are all survival. Like these are
Yeah.
things that are just, they're innate in us. It's an evolutionary process. So from dorsal, we're going to, maybe go for a walk to create some mobilization. Then we are in sympathetic. And so now we're mobilized. Now maybe we might do either a little bit more of an active exercise, maybe hop on my spin bike for 15 minutes and, not do like a HIIT session, but,
Sure.
maybe just do like a nice, easy one. And then I can then go outside and either go stand in the grass and ground myself on the earth, or I could do some breathing exercises. And so we could also think yoga, like lots of, I'm not a yogi per se, but pretty much everything that's done in yoga is all nervous system regulation practice. And
Yeah.
so those are ways to move us back up the ladder. And we can't, we can't skip over sympathetic. So when we're in dorsal, we have to actually move through sympathetic in order to get back to ventral.
The only way out is through.
Exactly.
All right. So now we're on to the third step of the neuro leadership approach, which is the success leadership mindset. Okay.
So I bring this all together by thinking with people once we have established that we've sort of cleaned out the pipes, we've got their mental house clean, they have a great way for mind body regulation. Part of the mind body regulation, I also work with people on detoxing their thoughts, and so that's just some other cognitive approaches. So we've done all of that. Now we're bringing it all together, and now we're starting to think about the resilience that it takes in order to be an entrepreneur, right? So entrepreneur is risky business. I like to say this, it's risky business, right? You don't go, like, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you really have to be pretty sturdy. We want to fortify ourselves from all of the stressors, our mind and our body. And so I talk a lot about that in terms of building up the resilience and in the mindset piece. This is where I bring mindset in. And all of that then enables us to then access our flow state. Because the reality is we only access flow state when we are in ventral vagal. And we're not going to be able to access the flow creative state, which is when we are like really firing on all cylinders without having to work for it. And so that's a key element for entrepreneurs who want to keep growing, right? Most entrepreneurs, they're not just like creating one thing and they're one and done. It's a constant evolutionary process. So I then really, for me, that flows into the work of the resilience, the flow state, fortification of mind and body. And I sort of wrap all that in. And then we have an entrepreneur who's able to withstand the economic downturns. I mean, my practice, I had my daughter in 2009. I had a brick and mortar practice. Between 08 and 09 was really when the economy was tanking.
Yeah.
Nothing happened to my practice. I mean, I was actually fine. Same thing happened during the pandemic. And I'm not bragging because seriously, there's a lot of people who like really lost a lot.
Yeah.
But, I really worked hard at fortifying my own psyche, my mind, my body, my business, all of that from being able to manage it. And same thing with the pandemic. A lot of people really struggled with their businesses during the pandemic. Some actually thrived. Therapy thrived. Online digital entrepreneurship thrived, right? Sure. So I do think that we have to be able to have a way to navigate those ups and downs because they're inevitable and they're reflective of just life, right?
Yeah. Oh, I have so many questions. So real quick, I just want your opinion with the experience and work that you do. Do you think that entrepreneurship, because it takes a certain person, a certain wiring, a certain mindset, right? Do you think that's something that people just have, or can you learn those skills?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if we take Carol Dweck's work on mindset, her book called Mindset, we could think about growth and fixed mindset. So most entrepreneurs have a growth mindset. And according to Carol Dweck's research, we can be trained to do that. Yeah. So I do think that's possible. I think the other piece that might be a little bit different is that people have to be also want to be in that kind of hustle. My husband and I talk about this all the time. He and I have a very different tolerance for that. Like I have a huge tolerance for the uncertainty and the hustle, and it still stresses me out, but it doesn't at all make me shy away. And he and I are just wired differently that way. Now, could he rewire to be more like me? I'm not so sure. So I don't really know about people doing a 180. But I think if, they're moving 90 degrees, maybe that's possible, but I do default to Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. So I think a lot is possible.
Yeah. It's interesting. We're both like the roller coaster riders versus the Ferris wheel or the merry-go-round. And there's nothing wrong with either, but the 9-to-5 job and the security and having a boss is more of the merry-go-round with the certainty and the safety. And then we're on the roller coaster. And I agree with you where there's definitely times of, oh, this is stressful or there's uncertainty. But for me and probably you, the highs of the other side of it outweigh the stressors or the, the lows, if you will. Yeah. Okay. So my other question, we can skip it. We can come back to it because I forgot what it was. So, so that's where we are with that. Amazing. So let's talk for a second about any common mistakes or myths that you want to bust when it comes to just this idea of subconscious reprogramming and NLP and all these things that are trending
Mhm.
and so important for everyone. Oh, I know what my question was. You
Ah,
answer that and I'll come back to it.
okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, so common mistakes. Okay, so I with some of the thing or pitfalls or
sure.
things that I really see with people is a not going deep enough, so they're just scratching the surface. And it's like, you're building a house, you build a house, you start with the foundation, you're putting those big cement blocks in the ground, and then you're building up, and then you're framing it out, and then you've got the windows, and you got all the structure. The very last thing that you do is you're painting and you're adding curtains. Okay, so my work is not the paint and the curtains. My work is really putting the pillars in the ground, the foundation in the ground, and framing everything out. So the first, I would say, pitfall or common pitfall that people have is they're not going deep enough. They're really staying on the surface. Um, Number two is the DIY approach to subconscious reprogramming. There is no such thing to doing that, right? So I spent a really long time training between graduate school and postgraduate training, and my clinical work really was in the study of the subconscious mind, psychoanalysis for anyone who knows it, but that's really where I did my work. And psychoanalysis is really the study of the subconscious and the unconscious mind. And I can assure you that there is no DIY approach to subconscious reprogramming. It's just not possible. Now there's hacks like hypnotherapy and rapid transformational therapy and some of these other things that I'm trained to do, but really we can't do it on our own. And when people try to DIY it, what they end up doing, and this is kind of the third pitfall, is they end up creating these affirmations, whether they buy a deck of cards or they make some up on their own, and they create these affirmations. And they believe that because of neuroplasticity and the repetition of the affirmation, that they can actually change their mind.
Mm,
Now, the problem with that is that the affirmation actually has to be directly linked to what is at the root or the source of what the limiting belief and the mental block is. And the only way to do that is to get into the subconscious reprogramming. And so I do a piece in one of my workshops on how to actually create your own tailor-made affirmations that really, really work. And
yeah.
so we can't just install something repeatedly that we don't believe because it's actually not linked to the source of something. We're not going to be able to convince our minds. It's like you asked me about hypnotherapy and suggestibility. We can't convince our minds of something that our mind either can't or won't be convinced about. And
Yeah.
so affirmations they just don't have they're not robust enough, I
Yeah.
guess. The repetition of they're not robust enough.
Yeah.
Those are sort of the three pitfalls I would say that or common mistakes I see for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Something that I've experienced with affirmations too is just like, oh man, I've used them for so many years, not recently, but previously. And I'd stick them up a post-it note on my mirror and you sort of cruise control, fall asleep at the wheel to them. And like you almost, at least me, I shouldn't say you, I would not even see them anymore. Like it's on the mirror, but I don't even see them anymore. They just become like a smudge on the mirror. I should clean that. Right. And it just is there. And even if I read it or say it, I don't necessarily feel it because it's just always there and nothing has changed. And so then I feel like it's not working. And so then I throw them away.
Yeah, and I think that that's what happens for most people. I don't use affirmations. I have a few stickies in places, and they are reminders that anchor me when I get down. So I have one right here, and it says, "My why for doing this is greater than the feelings I have when I get discouraged when something doesn't work out." And so
Mm,
I remind myself of that, right? And so it's not an affirmation. I don't repeat it. I don't need to get it in there. It's just like, when I'm at the bottom of that roller coaster, because right, we're all riding it. When
yeah.
I'm down here, I'm like, all right, remember that though. Like all the reasons why I'm doing this, actually the scales are tipped in that direction.
Yeah.
And it's really why I stayed in private practice and never went and worked for somebody, because my reason for doing it was almost always greater than the challenges that came with
I love that. I'm going to borrow that. Carrie, I can talk to you all day. I feel like we barely scratched the
it.
surface. I'm like, we just started. I want to be mindful of your time. You are my favorite brain architect, my favorite mindset ninja. Before anyone jumps off, how can people find you? How can they work with you? Where do you hang out most? What cool things do you have going on?
Yeah, so I hang out. So my main platform is LinkedIn.
Woohoo!
I love being on LinkedIn. Maybe you can link that in the show notes, because it's hard to find people on LinkedIn just by their name. But I am active daily on Instagram with posting and stories. So that's my second main platform. So you can find me on Instagram at Carrie Cohen Coaching. I also have a website, which maybe you'll put that in the show notes as well. And I host monthly workshops. I do rewired workshops. I do group hypnotherapy workshops on different things. I did wealth last month. This month's imposter. I have a few other ones coming up. I'm going to be doing some nervous system regulation workshops, some other subconscious reprogramming workshops. And I do those monthly. I like to it's just kind of fun to do those. And then I'll be launching my group program that is going to be all of this wrapped up in one beautiful package that you get to do with me for a few months.
I love it.
So you could stay tuned for that.
I love it. And I have to just tell the audience that's listening right now, the coolest part about your Rewired series is that it's not a one and done. So when you come into the Rewired hypnotherapy session, there are things for you to take after to continue to do the work, to get that repetition in, to really beat that cornfield down.
Exactly. I give pre-work and post-work. It's not too much work for those who don't want a lot, but you could do as much as little as you want, depending upon what you want to get out of it.
I love it. I love you so much. We've got 2 last questions. You got time for them?
I got it. Yeah.
All right. So the $50,000 question, if I were to cut you a check tomorrow for $50,000 that you had to use in the business any way you wanted, you could split it up or use it in one lump sum. What would you do?
Oh, wow. I would invest it in some kind of mentorship.
Cool.
I would spend it / invest it in mentorship, because it's really, it's what I love doing. So that's what I would do. Some mentorship. I don't know if that would be spiritual or business, but that's what I would do with it. Mm-hmm.
I love it. And then our last question, I think we're on the same page here, but we do believe that our businesses grow and evolve to the extent that we grow and evolve, and they're always changing. And that's why we named the company Digital Business Evolution. So what is your next personal or business evolution?
Well, I am in this incredible 1-year mastermind this year that has 3 business in-person retreats. So I see myself like evolving and expanding at a much deeper level this year as a result of that. And just being in the room with people who are doing things that I have yet to do that I can learn from. So I'm definitely always sort of someone who wants to be growing, and I manage the feelings of fear and threat and intimidation that come from being around people who are just doing really amazing things.
I love it. Carrie, you're the best. Thank you so much for being here.
As
always, of course, if you love this episode, which I know you did, we barely scratched the surface. You probably have so many questions. Carrie is super approachable. So take a screenshot, share it out on social media, tag me at I am Jessica DeRose, tag Carrie at Carrie Cohen Coaching, Carrie Cohen Coaching. Let us know what you loved. And as always, friends, cheers to your evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.